live show. We have a very unique opportunity this week to have two industry leaders that represent massive, literally tens of thousands of us in the industry globally. With us is Dr. Cecil Staton with Alhoa, President of Alhoa and CEO, and also with us is Mr. Bob Gilbert, President and CEO of HSMAI, Hospitality Sales Marketing Association International. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you very much for taking the time today to be with us.
Our pleasure.
Good morning.
The other cast of characters are a little bit more familiar for those who join the show with us regularly. I'm sure we all look different on the screen, but with us is Mr. Edward StOnge with Flip2 in the upper corner. With us also is Ms. Kat Mohammed, who is the Director of Education for Alhoa, who is a regular co-host of ours. And with us also is Mr. Robert Cole with Rock Cheetah. Knowing that we did not script this or decide that we're going to have a predetermined list of questions and so forth, I think probably the uniqueness of being able to have both of you gentlemen on the show today is a testament to the unique times that we're in right now and what we're facing as an industry. And since you represent so many and probably get in ways questions and insights that are just flooding you right now from people within your constituencies of memberships, we'd love to go over and think that they can be brought up in conversation because there's so much white noise out there right now. We're all looking to clarify things and to organize thoughts and to keep calm to situations that have really run rampant that aren't by weekly notification or even daily, but sometimes hourly. Things changing so quickly for us and impacts and so forth. And as we've talked about on the show before, and as I'm sure you're all intimately know of, there's a large number of management that has never lived through something like this. They've never been in a down economy. They've only been in a plane that flies. They've never been in one that has to land. So with that in mind, gentlemen, I leave the conversation open to you all as to which direction would you like the dialogue to begin? Would you like to talk about things that you have brought up to concern or things that you see as insights? I leave it to either of you to start. Doctor, if you'd like to start first, by all means, let us know what you would like to begin the conversation with.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be with you. You know, I think we're in strange times, unprecedented, as you suggest, for many people who work in our industry. At Alhoa, we represent almost 20,000 hoteliers. We believe more than half of the hotels in the country. You know, we're hearing things that are very troubling. A lot of people are hurting. We're seeing reports from our members of occupancy dropping to 20%. Some of them reporting they're down 30 to 50%. There's an enormous amount of concern. And so as an association, we're obviously gearing up to do what I think Alhoa has always done best, and that is be the voice of America's hoteliers through our advocacy, and also to support them through what we can do with our educational endeavors and initiatives particularly. And Kat does such a great job with her team on in that space. But it is a very difficult time. As you probably know, it led us to make the decision yesterday, after a lot of contingency planning over the last week or so, to move our trade show. Alhoa has probably the largest trade show specifically geared towards hotel owners each year, Alhoa Con, and we were scheduled to be in Orlando in just a few weeks' time. So we made the decision to postpone that just because of conditions on the ground there. And the difficulty, candidly, that our owners are facing as business people, many of them small business people, now trying to figure out how they're going to hold on to their employees, how they're going to pay the mortgage, how they're going to deal with, most of them are franchisees, how they're going to deal with a lot of the issues that are peculiar and unique to the franchise model. And so we're in there scrambling a little bit, working hard to make sure we're going to be able to support and help them. But it is definitely a difficult time.
Mr. Gilbert.
Well, Lauren, I think as some of you may know, over the last week, we've done 3 different webinars to try and answer a lot of the questions that our members are asking. And our members really represent professionals globally in the sales, marketing, and the revenue management community. But from the the biggest question people were asking initially was, are we overreacting? And I think from a business perspective, that's really a difficult question. A lot of people are asking questions that just can't be answered right now. So we really are in unprecedented times. For the salespeople, the first question they were asking, they were dealing with legal issues, cancellations for groups, and a lot of businesses trying to look for alternatives in different scenarios. So the first question out of the box was, is the force majeure piece of the contracts, is it all plausible, and how much of it is enforceable? The marketing folks, the biggest questions they're dealing with are crisis communication planning. Obviously, taking care of their guests and their brands are first and foremost in their mind. And then the revenue optimization side of the equation, the number one question people are asking is, how do I forecast in this environment? In the webinar we produced, went back and pulled some case studies going back from the last couple of recessions of Carter Wilson from STR did a great job of illustrating the research they've documented on why discounting doesn't work when demand is low. And so, aside from all the empathy we have for all the individuals that have been impacted, a lot of hoteliers are left with the having to deal with the business at hand, and they've got to continue to focus on that business as they can, because customers and current guests are expecting them to know what to do. So we're just trying to do the best we can to provide some of those answers. And I think the response was overwhelming. We actually blew out our webinar ceiling. We had to increase our license to more than 1,000 different users. So that's a good problem to have when people are really anxious to understand how to do a better job of managing the business at hand.
Certainly. Gentlemen, may I introduce Ms. Lily Mockerman, CHDM. She is with TCRM Services and ThinkUp. She's one of our regular co-hosts as well, and her perspective is mostly in relationship to revenue management along with other things, but she's brilliant when it comes to that as well. To that point, when it comes to this, it sounds, first off, was the first reaction was, what is the impact of this? We know that this will pass as we have lived through in other circumstances and so forth. Do you feel that that is a sooner rather than later, or are we having to ride out this shock wave for longer than we can even perceive? Is there any scope to this, or as you say, it's just a question we can't answer? And gentlemen, either one, but if you'd like to comment, please.
Well, I think Bob, mentioned the factor that we're all dealing with, and it's the unknown. It's fear. I mean, candidly, if you look at this statistically across the country, it's it would be easy to come to the conclusion that there has been an overreaction in terms of the declines that our members are seeing across the country, literally every community in the country. But whether or not there is an overreaction, it is the reality we're having to deal with. And I think we're really dealing with the fear of the unknown. We don't know where this is going. We think, we hope that maybe it will peak soon, if it hasn't already, with warmer weather, all these kinds of things. Everyone's talking about that. But the reality is we don't know. So we have to prepare. And as Bob was suggesting, we are also seeing a lot of people join our webinars. We are planning a lot more webinars over the coming days that will be focused on the issues that our members, hoteliers, are going to really have to face in for the foreseeable future. I think one of our jobs, because we're about advocacy as well, we have a strong team based in Washington, a second office for AHOA. We do a lot of advocacy at the federal and state level. We really, at the appropriate time, are going to need every entity within our industry, but also government help to really promote tourism. And we're going to have a plan to get that going quickly because we don't want this to drag on any longer than it absolutely has to. We want to be very much aware of the serious realities of it. Our hoteliers want their hotels to be safe, and they're taking precautions in every way that they can. But at the end of the day, we've got to get Americans traveling again. And we've got to bring international visitors to this country again, because that is what drives this industry and its impact upon the economies of so many communities across this country.
Mr. Gilbert?
No, I think so. Cecil brings up a great point that the trade associations out there are different from the professional societies like HSMAI. The trade associations, obviously, we're going to support it to the extent that we can. Between HOA and HNLA and U.S. Travel Association, they're out there doing all the right things they need to do to advocate for the industry and make sure the government's supporting it. From the educational perspective, I think a lot of our members, though, are still on the front lines, and we're seeing this around the world. To your original question, Lauren, what's the impact? Well, we don't know. Nobody's going to know that exactly. There are a number of people watching the lag time that's happening. But if you look at the depth of our colleagues over in Asia Pac, I mean, imagine a city like Hong Kong running 9% occupancy. If that happened in New York or Miami or LA, I mean, this industry would be crippled for a long, long time. I don't think the depths, we won't see the depths to that degree, at least based on what we know currently. The first real numbers we looked at last week from STR were RevPAR was down a little less than 12%. And I think we're going to see a significant slowdown at least for 30 days. But beyond that, we just don't know. We can watch what's happening as the ripple rolls across, Italy and Europe and other markets. But from a demand perspective, there's not a whole lot that you can do from a sales, marketing, or revenue management perspective unless you can try and steal market share, and that's a really expensive proposition. You want to make sure you're taking care of whatever guests you have. And on the webinar yesterday with the marketing folks, they talked about what are the short-term opportunities for hotels. And after you take care of your current and future guests, there are some short-term opportunities digitally of things that you can do. There will be leisure markets that are redirected from perhaps an international trip to now a drive market. And certainly there's been some phenomenal pricing on airfares and stuff, at least domestically, that's trying to stimulate what little demand there is. And in the hotel business, that usually translates into leisure demand. If corporate slows down and if groups and meetings slow down, there's still going to be some leisure demand out there that can be redirected, perhaps. So I heard one person say on an interview yesterday that they were going to self-quarantine themselves for 14 days, but they were going to do it in the Caribbean. So, you have got to, make hay when the sun shines when you can. And what little demand is out there, marketers should be at least aware of it.
Certainly. And I don't mean to hog the questions. My apologies. My co-hosts, please intercede at any time. I'm keeping most of the chat conversations at bay because there is quite a few questions coming. We're simulcasting, and Bob, thank you to Jason, reached out quickly and said, with Bob being on the show, can you throw it onto HSMAI's Facebook page as well? So we have people coming through that channel as well and they're asking a lot of, just so you know, more direct, actionable questions like, should I be concerned about staffing and labor? Is this something I should just, diminish my marketing until I have where I can spend the money where it's going to be more effective? So there's a lot of operational questions that are floating out that are more A-specific, as you pointed out, Bob, ground level at this point, that people are literally walking today to their businesses and there's not many guests that are there. And there's a lot of staff that are standing around going, how long am I going to be able to keep my hours going or something? So to that point, but any of my co-hosts, is there anything that you would like to ask while we have the opportunity to ask these two gentlemen questions? I mean, this is pretty cool.
So I'd like to pose to both of you, and I understand that Kat may end up answering this question because of what she does for a HOA. What are you looking into to help hotels deal with the fact that they can't just come back and turn things on the way they were running? They're actually going to have to change to capitalize on the rest of the year. What are you looking into as groups for how to help hotels discover how to shift their strategies and how to shift their business practices to try and because quite honestly, let's talk about the fact they need more profitable business for the rest of the year to try to make up for however long this issue is going to create a vacuum of demand.
Kat?
Nothing like being in front of the boss and answering a question, now, is there?
So as far as content, we realize absolutely that the industry is at a point where it needs resources. The best that we are able to do through the education department is offer information for them to think differently, and we're trying to do it as timely as possible. some of the topics that we're hitting on, because I think Lauren, some of the items that he listed along with Bob, with what HSMI is holding webinars on, are definitely topics of interest to our members, but we're also looking at the impact on the trucking industry and how that is impacting delays. There's delays in hotel openings and construction overall. We're approaching the financing side, how to seek financing and prepare yourself for an approval, given that your performers are going to be way different than what you were presenting before. And also from the financing side, how do you go to your bank and seek concessions? How do you, negotiate what you have going on right now? Is there some type of interest forgiveness or something that you can work out? Some other topics that we're looking at: employment considerations from the legal aspect, and then also the safety side. We are also hosting a webinar specific to California, considering that they have such different regulations and laws specific to them. We're really trying to attack this from so many routes. I don't want to take up too much of the time from Cecil and Bob being featured on the show. But the most we're trying to do is, one, we've polled our entire board, and we're currently polling our membership to find out what it is they are struggling most with. And from that, we'll be able to produce more direct resources to help them out. So we're listening to our members, we're listening to what's going on in the industry, and trying to churn out as quickly as possible information to help them.
Can I just mention one other level that is in addition to all the great things Kat and her team are working on? I mean, we really, our focus is owners, right? So we're trying to help our owners as they are having to deal with banking issues that's going to come up. We're trying to help them think through how they can deal with their local municipalities, cities and counties, with respect to occupancy taxes and things like that right now. We already know of some members who've had some success in getting some forbearance there in that respect. We also are very interested in what the president announced the other evening, the SBA loans, some other opportunities that may come along. So we want to do everything to help them, in their advocacy, both in their local communities, all the way up to the opportunities they may have to take advantage of things the government may offer them. But what we're hearing, there's a lot of pain out there, and I'm afraid the pain is to grow. And if this is not something that changes rather quickly, you're going to see some folks facing bankruptcy, I fear. You're going to see some folks who are going to have some very difficult situations relative to their staffs and employment levels. And so we just want to be of help in all the ways we can, and continue to monitor and listen to make sure we know of other ways that maybe haven't been thought of yet that we can help.
Yes, Cecil's exactly right. I mean, if you think of a slowdown, a significant slowdown for at least 30 days in business, the ripple effects of that are going to be long standing. Even if it is only 30 days, that there's a significant slowdown, there are all sorts of ripple effects that they're affecting everything already. I mean, we never before have seen schools and colleges and universities close for the rest of the semester. Think about those students that still have apartments to pay for, and the restaurants in those college towns. I mean, the ripple effect will be material, and it will go on for some time.
So there's another aspect to this that I think we're working on, and it's again unique for owners, and it's their relationships with the brands. Most of them are franchisees of all the various hotel brands. AHOA represents all of them at every level of service. So this week I've spent time on the phone, emailing brand CEOs, and I want to pat them on the back for a second. A lot of them are stepping up to take some actions that will be helpful to their franchisees. They are pushing the pause on some brand standards or some of the requirements that are out there in ways that can hopefully help the bottom line for their franchisees in the near term. So that's another important angle to this that we're working on as well.
That's great.
For those of us who have lived, sorry, Robert, you were going to say, please go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, yeah, brand standards are fine except for housekeeping. And one area I really have recommended strongly to the industry is to actively communicate how the processes that a hotelier is used to clean the rooms, because in most cases those housekeepers are much better housekeepers than we are at home. So having done that quasi professionally, as many of us have, that is a very, very difficult job, and to do it right, and that's stuff. So I think the bottom line, my case is always, how do you focus on the guests? How do you keep them safe? How do you focus on keeping your staff safe? Right. And that's the real critical thing, because my personal feeling is the greatest challenge for the staff is going to be they're pressed for, they need the income, and I'm not feeling that well, I'll just show up today at work, I'm probably fine. That may not be the best, and that's a tough situation for the hoteliers to manage. So they're going to be, this is a localized property by property. How does that property work with their local government, local health departments, and make this go? So it's it's got to come from the top, and it's got to come from the bottom to help the guests and help the staff.
So obviously similarities have been drawn not to 08, which was financial, more of 9/11, and of those of us that, most of us on this, to live through that in one process in the industry or another, that and the anthrax scare afterwards in Florida was a little bit more pronounced longevity that I had to do with it as well. There are similarities to this, the fear of travel, but this is even exacerbated farther by the fact of fear of actually going outside, engaging with people, where before maybe the people didn't want to travel, but they'll still go to the local restaurant, or as you said, they're still going to school. That's changed in that scope. We're literally traffic in social engagement. We're using terms like self-quarantine. That wasn't even a word for me 30 days ago, and social distance.
But it should have been. Let's be honest.
It should have been. Probably would have been.
If anyone's met Lauren at a trade show, it's like, stop hugging me.
But with all those similarities, there are dissimilarities. You all both represent two entities that, from all the communication coming up with you, how are you sorting the noise internally for people to realize there's similarity but dissimilarity, that there's commonness, but there's also new things that have to be considered, as you said, short-term and so forth. Bob, is there any short-term advice right now? I mean, is it stay the course? I mean, I know that from an ancient science perspective, you're looking at like, hey guys, we got to face the wind here and stay the course, because this is something as an industry we have to take on collectively. Is there any insights on the short term that you would want to share from what you're being exposed to?
Well, there's two dimensions to that, Lauren. There's the business, managing the business of, as Cecil said, the employees, and the asset needs to be protected, and you want to take care of your employees and make sure the health of your current guests are there. Hopefully most sales and marketing people are staying the course, but they're going a different direction perhaps, because if I would like to think that if there's anybody that's going to have the glass half full, it's going to be your sales and marketing teams. And they're the ones that should be looking for the opportunities that can bring some more revenue back into the property, the top of the funnel, because even in the worst of a crisis, there are still demand patterns out there. There are new markets that create demand. I mean, we hate to say it publicly, but the hotel industry is known for a long time that, a great boost for business can be a hurricane in the south, because the types of demand that creates after the event is insurance companies coming in and 80, 90 rooms for 90 days. And, and the ripple effects of that, there's lots of other business out there. So hopefully the salespeople are trying to get ahead of that wave of the current calamity at the business of the hotel, and looking forward to, where can they capture some revenue that's going to help generate cash flow, because at this point in time, in any low demand cycle, any type of cash flow is usually critical for any owner. So if the salespeople are doing that, they can find some of those demand nuggets.
And to that point, that also may include needing to change how you present your value proposition. So if you're an Orlando hotel that's dealing with the fact that the theme parks are closed, most people do not know at all what else Orlando would have to offer. Mm-hmm. And so not just assuming that your local market is going to know, what is Orlando? What do you have to offer? So, hopefully they're getting ahead of building new content that they previously didn't have to lean on. If your demand driver's gone, if you're New York and Broadway is shuttered, You need to actually discuss the other reasons that coming into New York would be meaningful. And quite honestly, the small businesses around you are depending on you as a lodging provider to help people understand that, because even though Disney closed, even though Universal closed, they're leaving Disney Springs and Universal City Walk open, because those are small businesses that, Disney doesn't own those businesses. Those are tenants who need to stay open and need demand. So everything is not gone for the things to do. So that's an important thing to think about.
You're right. There were some statistics released yesterday from MMGY Global that their digital search team said that the search statistics for travel have not dropped as dramatically as they thought they would. There are consumers still out there looking to travel, so they're advising a lot of their clients to look at some of the staycation markets and some of those drive markets where people, again, as I said earlier, are redirecting some of their travel patterns to, if they're going to travel. It may be delayed, it may be postponed, but it's still demand out there to be captured at some point in time.
Yeah. We have put a dike in front of the water. The water is right. There is going to be pent up demand. We've seen it in every cycle of these, maybe not the same as, but it's the same type of cycling thing. And having lived through a number of hurricanes, one of the benefits of living through a hurricane at the very end is getting to know your neighbors again. Your refrigerator isn't working. You got to grill all the stuff that isn't thaws. So everybody's having a neighborhood barbecue. This is the chance to get out. Go talk to your local businesses that you've been so busy taking care of your own business you forgot to communicate as effectively before. Realize, as Ed has said, that you have this symbiotic relationship, and exercise options. See if there's a way you can collaborate and get value propositions from that you can offer to guests as an incentive value to making a decision of travel. But yes, those are some of the aspects of this, I would imagine.
Lauren, you're right. I think there's some different rules of engagement, though, that marketers need to keep in mind, though, whether it's the social distancing. I mean, if you're in downtown Seattle or if you're in the state of Washington, you've got some different parameters and some different rules of engagement, at least for a period of time before all that can be activated. But again, if you're looking at your business from a sales and marketing perspective, you need to be ahead of that curve and saying, what do I need to do on my website to identify that right value proposition for what I can reasonably anticipate when some demand does come back. So just keep it within what's appropriate for your market.
And speaking to those issues, Cecil, this is the first time, at least in my short career, which has gotten long, I'm getting old, in the industry, where governments are actually making decisions that are causing it difficult for businesses to operate. What are you all looking into for how those businesses, so like a Seattle, where it's been outlawed to have meetings over 100 people in a space, how are you looking into, both legally and with government aid, on what can be done for those areas long term?
Well, you point out something that's one of the realities of this situation. It's very different in Washington State or even some areas of California than it is here in Georgia, where I'm sitting. And so you're seeing a lot of activity at the local government level. Some of it is at the state level, where perhaps governors are declaring a state of emergency. Some going further to say, we are banning, or we are at least requesting that there not be gatherings above a certain number of people. So there's a lot of moving parts, and it is, of course, very difficult when you're trying to deal with every community in the country who may be doing something differently at a given time. But I think on the bigger scale, what we're advocating is, one, from a government perspective, let's please not make this worse than it already is by doing things that candidly are ridiculous or stupid. There are no travel bans in this country as of today, other than the ones the president mentioned coming from Europe, flights, the ones he's done perhaps to China. There are no travel bans internally in this country. If you look at this statistically, I'm either blessed or cursed. Most of my best friends are doctors. If you look at it statistically and compare it to just the normal flu and the normal number of people in my state of Georgia who currently have the flu versus the number of people who have the coronavirus, the mortality rate for both. I mean, a lot of this, again, is about fear. And people react to fear. They make decisions on the basis of how they feel, their comfort level. The government is reacting to fear. And so some of this we just hope will work itself out relatively quickly as we see the curve, whether it's going to be a U or a V. We get to the point where these things are going to settle down, as apparently they have done in China. And we begin to see a turn in the growing number of cases. But what we're asking the government to do, particularly at the federal level, is to look at ways that they can benefit business in general, and certainly hoteliers and the travel industry more particularly. We're looking at things like tax credit, payroll tax credits. We certainly are very appreciative of what the president said about the SBA loan potential, the $50 billion that may be available there as an infusion of capital. But, you know, we all know sometimes the government can get in the way as opposed to really giving us the help we'd like for them to do. But I think one of the things we're going to have to really advocate for is that when we're on the other side of this, that the government really does make some investment with this industry in promoting travel and tourism. And that's going to be one of the main things we focus on.
Cecil, I'm sure you've seen this. You know, there's been some precedents already set in some other governments around the world. Hong Kong and Singapore were the first two governments to provide major subsidies to businesses that were impacted. Everything from, you know, rent concessions for retail stores. They didn't affect the hotel industry directly, but certainly the hotel industries there are lobbying for that. But I think there has been some precedent set already, and those are great examples you brought up that can certainly help the businesses. They're going to be needed.
Well, that's right. And so we're working in partnership with, you would expect, U.S. Travel, AHLA. We're you know, really trying to take the advocacy efforts that the hotel brands have, work together to try to come up with some common sense solutions that can get this thing moving forward again quickly, and can really provide some benefit. You know, we just hope Congress and the administration will work together and we'll get some things done. This isn't a time to be in our corners lobbing shells at one another. This is a time to really do something, because to fail to do that, or to avoid doing that for some reason, is going to prolong this. And the consequences, unfortunately, in some places, in some areas, could be devastating, or at least inaction could lead to this taking much longer to come out on the other side.
Certainly. Just to share some dialogues that are on other channels, it's interesting. There's a lot of sub-conversations. We often wonder, from a show's perspective, the different tiers of people that engage with us. We know ownerships do, and brands, and software service companies, and so forth. There seems to be, and on Twitter, a lot of going back and forth about staff line employees talking about how their management is not listening to their concerns, and management on the same channel replying to them, not specifically as their manager, but as a representation of what they are responsible for. So it's an interesting dialogue you've literally created on a ground level of people going back for, why is my manager not worried about me being sick? And then the manager said, we are worried about you being sick. Don't try to, you know. And so there's interesting dialogue. This is, to your point, a point of fear. This is a point of uncertainty, the duration of which is still yet to be determined for it. And the cohesiveness of your gentlemen's conversations from your perspective of representation is solid, because so much white noise is out there right now of everybody throwing out their 2 cents, whether it's justified or not. And as we pointed out, not everybody's an authority on this stuff, and not that all of us are an authority on these things, but the aspect that we represent people that can collectively come up with some solution processes. So I can't thank you enough for the fact that collectively you're talking about these things. But is there a way that we can continue this? Like, how can we keep that voice? Like, Bob, you have your webinars, and Cecil, you have your webinars, and you have your dialogues, and you have your lives things, and so forth. Is there a way, as you said, that without lobbing things back and forth, that we could collectively keep clarity to the process of what everybody that you all represent can use? You know, actionable things like, how do I stress test my budgets? How do I determine market strategies? You know, how do I know when's the right time for rate variations? And these pop up a little, you get asked a little question off to the side, and I'm sure we'll hit that later on in the show. But just, these are the hardcore things that are immediate concern for them at this point. And you all represent those kind of answers. So I would love to know, what are some of your future anticipations that you're looking to try to do?
Well, Lauren, I think, Cecil and Kat both mentioned this. I think the things that associations have a responsibility to do is listen to their members. And to answer any of those questions you gave as an example, there's no one right answer for any particular hotel or hotel company or asset. It's going to be different in every situation. But we have to understand what those underlying trends are and what are the themes and how can we contextualize that into meaningful either change or education for our respective stakeholders. And that's, I think, what we'll have to continue to do. At HSMAI, we have, 3, advisory boards that we depend on heavily for what are they seeing on the front lines on a weekly basis in sales and marketing and revenue optimization. And that's where the ideas are coming from. I mean, just this morning, we released a special report that actually aggregated it was all the gold winners from the crisis communications category, the Adrians, for the last 3 years. And we didn't realize what we were sitting on to some degree, to be perfectly candid, until we looked at the list and we had SARS and we had what Carolina had done and we had a couple of hurricanes. And we had these case studies that really were sitting in the archives. We pulled them all together and published them in a special report that went online this morning, free to anybody. But there's these tools out there we can learn from history, even though we're sitting here in unprecedented times. While everybody should always have a contingency plan, everybody has admitted that nobody could have had a contingency plan that was as comprehensive for what we're facing right now. So we have to keep strategizing and on a daily basis.
Actually, just to interject something, since we've started the broadcast, there's going to be the president's having a press conference at 3 p.m. apparently to declare a national emergency, which should basically open up about $42 billion in additional funding for to combat this. But yeah, it is unprecedented. I mean, it's interesting. People aren't going to have a diversion either. I mean, there aren't sports, there aren't events and things like that to take their mind on it. So people are just going to be looking at this very directly. Just one thing, just statistically, I'd like to throw in. There's some interest. The key is really testing, because a lot of the uncertainty is we don't know how many people have it because the testing isn't there. Just a couple of benchmarks. South Korea, this is per capita testing, and this is from the CDC and authoritative sources. South Korea's tested about almost 3,700 people per million, right? So that's not a lot, but that's a good amount. Guangdong, China was about 2,800. Italy, where you see they're having tremendous problems, was only 826. The big red flag for me is the U.S. is 5. And so that's what's going to create, and that uncertainty we've been talking about, that's going to be the challenge of, if we don't know how many people have it, we don't have the test, that's going to elongate the period.
Well, but to be fair, that data is a bit skewed because you're ignoring time. If we rewind a couple of weeks and look at those stats for South Korea and China, I'm sure their per capita testing was far lower. So while it is concerning, we also need to be mindful that it's going to ramp up as it ages into our market. And something else I just wanted to throw out there, because this is unprecedented time. One thing I'd like to remind everyone is be kind to each other and show support for each other. So Cecil, Bob, I super appreciate everything you and your teams are doing. And, I know maybe people aren't remembering to thank you for these things, because it's so incredibly important to the recovery effort. What you're doing today, the thoughtfulness that you're putting into this, this industry will feel the results of your efforts.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed.
I want to mention just what I've read in the last 24 hours. 80% of the people who come down with this virus are going to have very minor symptoms. And another statistic that's quite telling is that of those who have died from the coronavirus to this point, the average age is 80. Mm-hmm. Now, just taking those two statistics alone, I hope we can tap down some of the hysteria and the fear we're going to be okay,
Mhm.
and we're going to get through this thing. And from a HOA's perspective, with almost 20,000 members, we want to be the voice of those hoteliers to make sure that this industry comes out even stronger on the other side of that, and it has the future. Because, as I like to say, I go to work every day and I represent 20,000 entrepreneurs. They're living the American dream. Many of them are first generation Americans, second, third generation at most. They are creating jobs, they are building businesses, they're having impact upon their local economies. And we don't want that to be harmed as a result of this.
Mhm.
So we've got to find our way through, and we're committed to listening to our members, as Bob said, and we're going to do our best to provide them resources that will help them on the ground and be advocates for them with government, with brands, across the board, to make sure that we all come out of this on the other side and have an opportunity to continue to do what our industry does so well, has done so well, and will do it into the future.
Yeah. Ed, Robert, one thing that hasn't come up yet in our conversation, we talked about the fear of the virus, and I agree with Cecil. I think that there is a fear of unknown there, but it's been proven there's so many people they've already interviewed that have gotten it, have already cured from it, and they're fine. So it is relatively short term, unless you're in that at-risk age group. Mm-hmm. But I think the other factor that is creating fear and is contributing to a lot of the decisions in the last couple of weeks, the last couple of days, is the fear of the stock market. I mean, I think the drops there have also been unprecedented, and so that really reflects the global impact that this ripple effect. And people are questioning, is the stock market really a function of coronavirus, or was it just bloated a little bit? It was time for a correction. I think, from a personal standpoint, that surprised me. And I think with the recovery of that, will certainly put a lot of other fear at bay. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, we've been saying this on the show for probably a year, because the hotel industry fundamentally really started plateauing from a RevPAR perspective really almost 3 years ago. So this recovery has been fantastic. But we've always said, well, there's going to be a downturn, but nobody knows what will trigger it. We're saying probably some sort of event nobody can anticipate, right? This is probably it. You have the P ratios, things in the market were just really crazy, right? Unprecedented historical levels. So it was due for a correction. I think the challenge is really the volatility. I mean, 2 days ago, anyone who would have predicted, after the president goes on television, all of a sudden future markets are down 7%, right? That's bad. Well, today is Friday the 13th. I don't know how the market's going to be emotionally. Overnight, same thing, 24 hours a year, it's up 5%. Nobody can predict what's happening. So that's the real challenge. And with those statistics, my main point was, the 5 is there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, right? So, and I really think that it is going to be a localized effort. It's going to be. It used to be the most important people in a town were, and I remember this back in the Old West, Ed. So I'm just preempting his comment here. but it was really the mayor, the sheriff, and the innkeeper, right? They ran the town, and I think it's your owners, Cecil, are going to be in that situation. What's the best thing from a social responsibility, perspective, to really try to do the right thing, to calm people and say, wait, no, we're here, we're going to help you, and to work with the local communities, talk to the doctors and the folks who know what's happening. What can we do? Is there anything we can do to help? Because that's what's really going to get things back on track faster, is to know, here's what we do, here are the best things to happen. And also, if you start seeing people going, hey, stop, let's not shake hands when we greet guests, we know that used to be a thing, let's stop doing simple things like that. Making sure you have hand sanitizers, and all those processes are just going to be hugely important to do your little part. But I think it winds up being everybody doing their little part to go, let's get through it, because we will. Yeah, this is not going to wipe out civilization, but it's also going to be a pretty big eye opener where you do have to be somewhat distanced from people to kind of knock this thing down. And that's why those Chinese numbers were so low. They took some steps which I can't imagine we would be taking here. So again, that may lengthen the time and maybe have more people get the virus. But again, we talk about it on the show all the time, the trade-off between kind of privacy and versus convenience and security. We've got to figure out where that is in a period of tremendous uncertainty. So it's going to be a challenge.
To springboard off of what you said, Cecil, kindness to everyone, and Ed as well. We're in the hospitality business. Core of our process, heart of the servant, is the quality of service we can provide our guests, and to that end, that answers a lot of questions that come up into the daily. What should I do when it comes to cancellations, staffing requirement changes, open and transparency of communication, and so forth. Is remember what you would want to be if you were on the recipient side of that conversation. And to that end, yes, you would like to go over and keep their money because they pre-booked and they're prepaid and all this other stuff. But the reality of it is that's not really maybe the strong suit decision to make at that moment. And goodwill and the value proposition of what you represent, that they want to do business with you, as was pointed out earlier in the show. There are people that still remember they will never do business with a certain company of how they were treated, feet to the fire, when these circumstances prevailed before for different reasons. So learning lessons in that way is a kind of a guiding light to some of this process. And obviously, again, to Ed, it's the same sentiment, echoing what you all are doing is not a thankless position, but should be thanked more. That clearing the clutter and keeping that ear to the memberships that you represent, and bringing that solidarity of single solution stuff rather than listening to the rabble is a value proposition beyond measure at this particular moment.
Absolutely.
Lauren, you raise a good point. I think I would just reiterate one part of that. Decisions that hoteliers make today in terms of how they deal with the transactions with their guests as it relates to changes and cancellations and scenario planning for groups and so forth, that has a chance to really create your brand or create your reputation for a long, long time. So I would encourage any hotelier out there just to do what you said and make sure you're making not necessarily what's the contractual decision, but what's the right decision, because these are times that any contract wasn't designed for.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
You think about times where our normal engagement with people tends to get overlooked and glazed over when what you remember most is the times when you needed something the most and who helped you the most. Mm-hmm. And these are those times. How we did what you're saying in the industry as leadership, how the hotel calms itself in its own market. There is a bit of a gap point between brands engagement compared to a property level, just as much as ownership is to the daily life. And making sure that communication pipe is between the two in solidarity, that they see the same mission and that they're approaching it the same way, is going to measure far beyond in the value in the future when things do come back to a sense of normalcy, because people remember how they were treated during these times. So yeah, very strong in that sense. So was there any questions that we may have missed from our co-host that we wanted to make sure we had the opportunity to ask before? Because strangely enough, I sincerely appreciate the love of time. I know you both are incredibly busy, and you give us originally a half hour of your time, and we're rolling up on an hour. So I don't want to be mindful of the fact that we're not appreciating it, but by the same token, we don't want to steal away your whole day, although we'd love to keep you around. Lily, you've been abnormally quiet. I didn't know if there was something you were waiting to ask for, or you just...
What are you trying to say, Lauren?
No, you're often quiet, strangely enough. But anyway, no.
Well, I like to defer to the experts who are here to speak to us, and I want to echo your sentiments to both of you. Bob, great to see you, and Cecil, nice to meet you here, and really appreciate you both taking the time. I think that this is such a timely thing for us to look at in the industry, and one thing that did just come up for me, we're talking about how to calm yourself and whatnot, but one of the things that we know that is unrelated but triggered by this coronavirus is the rising epidemic of mental health issues in the United States, and many of those tie back to some type of an anxiety. So I think that we're going to see an increase, and that may also speak a little bit to some of the panic, hoarding behaviors and things like that we're seeing all across the U.S., even in markets that aren't significantly affected. I know here in Arizona, we only have 9 confirmed cases last I checked yesterday, and yet there are completely barren grocery stores in Arizona. And so, how are you guys Or are you guys recommending any sort of mental health programming for employees? Because this is something that I think from a health insurance kind of standpoint, do we have those resources for employees at the hotel level that may be a bit panicked about the situation? And then also, I'm sure we'll get into it in a little bit more detail later, Steve's question about packaging. Is there a way that hotels can capitalize on this, especially those who are in more remote markets that maybe allow for social distancing as sort of a tranquil place to get away? Because within our clients, we're not yet seeing a lot of decline from leisure travel to non-major markets. Some of the more remote markets, the transient leisure segment is still pretty healthy, especially drive distance feeder markets. So there's a lot in that. This is like a Lauren question, I think. Right. But I guess my main question, given your positions, are how can we advise hoteliers on the best way to approach any mental health concerns, especially with their staff, but also as they deal with their guests?
That is a loaded question.
Well, like I mentioned, I wrote this down as another topic to enter into our COVID webinar series. So it was not a topic specifically addressed. We're looking at different employee considerations, but that is one we will definitely ask our speakers to highlight.
Yeah. And unfortunately, one of the contributing factors to the disease, I mean, certainly if you have lung issues and things like that and other health, but anxiety is one of the things that, really wind up, it reduces your, the quality of your immune response, right? Because your body's stressed out doing kind of unproductive things, being anxious. So yeah, that's going to be a very, very big factor. And again, especially because people don't have a release of, watching sports or, going to the theater or whatever the case may be. So, I think you bring up a great point, Lily.
Well, then the anxiety of the uncertainty of income and what have you. And
the stock market, all the things. Yeah.
Which goes back to what a part of our earlier conversation that both of you gentlemen have already addressed is the aspect that how we relate to our staff and team and how we handle that and how cooperative and helpful we are with the guests that are having to cancel their plans with us and so forth is the small little piece, as Ed says, that we can contribute to being kind and just say that this is one less thing that they have to be. But it does, to some degree, from a training point of view, if you're going to keep teams and try to keep them active, you're going to have to incorporate the fact of the calmingness of this, which, gentlemen, going back, you all do quite well with the associations on, again, jumping on this so quickly because of knowing the impact. You rode the wave as soon as it happened. You brought out content that was clear. You brought out information that was useful. You brought out answers to questions early rather than being the reverse, which is behind it. Because one thing that we didn't bring into today's conversation is the 800-pound social media gorilla that we have to work around every day now. And the disparity of disinformation and these anxieties run rampant in troll form online and so forth. And you all have to deal with that in numbers we can't even fathom. So, thank you for clarifying all those things as well for that.
But Lauren, I need to jump off in a minute, but I wanted to reiterate maybe something that I think was one of the key takeaways from our 3 different webinars this year. If there's 3 things they talked away with, one was a reminder for all hoteliers to be empathetic and take care of your customers and your employees first. Number 2 was take care of the business, because the business needs to survive. And the third thing, I think Carter Wilson articulated really well on the revenue optimization webinar, was in a down economy, nobody wins. So be realistic to the fact that nobody's going to win in this situation. What sales and marketers and revenue professionals can do is certainly try and mitigate some of the losses that you're going to have for the foreseeable future, but don't have an expectation everybody's going to win. But you got to take care of the employees and the guests first. Focus on the business, and remember, nobody's going to win in the short term, but it will come back. So
I would agree with just what Bob said. It's my understanding there probably, prior to the onset of this situation, there were 1 million unfilled jobs across this country for hoteliers and the hospitality industry. We've been in a period of full employment. And so really and truly one of the greatest assets any business has, and it's certainly also true of hotels, your staff. And so we are in unprecedented times. I'll just mention in Atlanta, where we're based, the local school systems in Atlanta and counties surrounding us, they have now suspended operations, some of them indefinitely, some of them for 2-3 weeks. So you have employees with kids trying to figure out how to make all this work. You have the hysteria and fear that we've already talked about during our time together today. We're going to have to be patient with our staff, and we're probably going to have to do some things that maybe we wouldn't do in normal times, because we've got to take care of each other and recognize that there are going to be unusual circumstances and challenges because of all this. So I would just say, for all businesses, and certainly for hoteliers, staff is key. And I've heard from so many of our members who really are struggling because financially maybe they do need to be making some decisions, just if they were looking strictly at the bottom line. But in reality, they've got employees that have been with them in some cases 10 years, and there's loyalty there. And so we're going to have to work on those things, and that is very genuine, the stress that's going to be out there, the mental health issues that are related to this. And so we're just, we're going to have to work together on those challenges because they're real, and they're probably going to be greater than ever.
Very true. Gentlemen, again, I thank you for your time and sensitive to the fact that we went past our initial request for all of it. But please, this is something we do every week on Fridays, have been for 6 years. We have a little over 15,000 people a week that listen to our show, and you've certainly added to those numbers today. If in any way we can be a help in conveying your message, we know you have your own internal resources and your own programs, and you're doing all these things. But if you feel that we can add to that voice, at any time, you are always an open invitation and welcome. We will dedicate any show that we can to whatever you'd like to have as a topic. If it's relevant that you want to bring to the table, we'll be happy to go over and amplify that message for you at any time. And sincerely appreciate both of you all's time and joining us today for the time that you gave us. Mr. Gilbert, I know that there was some resources we threw up on the chat off to the side of links that you had already referred to. If people want to find out more information from HSMAI, where is it that they can go, sir?
Just go to hsmai.org, and from there you can find a quick link to our Coronavirus Resource Center. And recordings of all the webinars we did this past week are there as well for free for anybody.
Excellent. And Mr. Cecil, I know too, you all, I know Kat has been adamant about putting out content and so forth and getting ahead of all these conversations as well for the resources that ALHOA has available to both its membership and those outside of it, and want to know more about ALHOA. Where is it that they can find that information, sir? We'll
certainly visit AHOA.com. We have right on our homepage currently both information about our trade show and convention, which has been postponed to August the 9th through the 12th. Hope everyone will be there and that this will all be largely behind us by then. But also our coronavirus resources right there on the homepage. And we're adding to those almost every day with updates. And a lot of this we're doing on the front end of our paywall as opposed to behind the paywall going forward, because we want everyone to take advantage of it right now. So thank you for letting me be here today, Lauren, and we'll look forward to further conversation, but hope people will visit us at ahoa.com.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Staton.
And on behalf of the industry, Cecil, Bob, thank you for having the industries back. Really important.
Very much so. Gentlemen, just with the little red buttons that are all over the place, the one that
do not
touch those. It's the one in the bottom, middle, and the bottom, because the one on the top right will shut the show up, and we're going to continue.
You can just close your browser.
Just close your browser. Just close.
Let's continue. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right. So first of all, kudos to all of you for behaving when we have real adults in this.
I'm very impressed. With Robert for a second, I was like, "Oh no."
There was some great chat. Dean Schmit, thanks for joining. Darlene, always lovely to have you with us. Ellis, thank you. Sorry we were not addressing them directly. We wanted to make sure we gave as much opportunity for both the gentlemen to speak as much, and we appreciate that. There was been crazy dialogue on the other chats, the ones that we had running. With that being said, there are some great points that were made by Dean and so forth about direct channel value proposition at this point, about revenue strategy given the short term. we can hit those things that we want to make sure while we still have the audience with us off to the side that came for the presenters. We can hit those conversations, and then Robert, we could always give justice to your list as well.
Hey, actually, just one thing for Ed. On those stats I was giving for the per capita, the Chinese one was from 2 weeks ago.
I was.
Okay.
Oh.
All right.
Yeah, those were common points in time, but anyway, yeah.
And since we have open windows and so forth, it's an open. Darlene, Dean, Alice, anybody that wants to pop up and show their face and chat about what they popped into the chat, just raise your hand. Let me know. We can add you in. Certainly bring into the conversation. But if we would like to tackle perhaps Dean's for the direct channel, since it resonated a couple times outside of that with other chats. How is anybody's perception of direct channel changing now in comparison to 2 weeks ago?
I got to be honest with you. I think direct channel is going to be very important to continue on, because I'm not sure, at least for the next few weeks, the OTAs are going to be overly successful. Because one of the biggest problems right now is in the fear. Oh, Kat.
Sorry.
Did Cecil just drop in?
That was classy.
I'm sorry.
You know what it is? Kat has so many admirers, they're trying to come through the windows. That's what it is. She can't keep them locked out.
The fanboys are after it. Up there they are. Yeah.
So I don't think OTAs are going to be able to wield a very strong sword in the next 2 weeks. Well, it's fear of potentially not being able to go somewhere based on how local governments are acting. I think you're really going to need to chime in on your local channel, and really looking at your drive markets. I think drive markets for the near term need to be your focus, because it's a lower risk trip for most people.
If you're a campground, you are in great shape. Right?
Hey, Dean, how are you, sir?
Dean, there we go.
Derby Stop. Oops. Can we hear you? Hold on a second.
You can hear me?
Yeah,
we go.
Good. Hey, Dean.
Hey, how is everyone?
Oh, having fun. Good to have you on.
Happy Friday the 13th.
Yeah. So for those who don't know Mr. Dean Schmit, brilliant man in regards to Metasearch. Great speaker on it. Has been with HSMAI several times on the topic. I had the privilege of working with him with DerbySoft for a little while. Man taught me a tremendous more than I ever can remember. And actually has a very good perspective on the value of Metasearch now as it has evolved. So, I mean, I would love to have you chime in on this direct channel conversation we're throwing in.
Oh yeah, great conversations and great points that have been made by Ed and Robert and such. And you know, as I mentioned in the chat, right now being able to control your narrative is so important, right? You don't know what's going on, and as we've talked already, the uncertainty out there is extreme, and so being able to take control of that conversation and own it, as opposed to letting somebody else do that for you, is so important right now. And so I think that's, you know, not just Metasearch, but direct bookings in general, I think take a center part of that stage. I will say, though, that when it comes to digital marketing, of course, as we'd expect, right? Yeah, click shares are down, the traffic is down, revenue is down, bookings are down. But this is also a really good time if you're able to try out new things. Mm-hmm. Because right now cost per click is also down. Mm-hmm. The number of clicks are down, so the amount of budget that you need to put into it is down. Looking at our numbers, actually, year over year, our conversion rates are actually up. So the ones who do click have a higher intent of booking. There tends to be a huge gap in between the prospecting, the middle funnel, and the direct response. That middle funnel part is really where it falls through, because my click-through rates, for example, on impressions are really low. Those have taken a hit. So if they do click, they tend to have a higher intent of booking. So our conversion rates are higher, average booking rates are higher, and my ROI is higher because my cost of sale is lower. So you're not going to get a ton of revenue off of it. It's not going to have that type of volumes, but now's a really good time to try these things out, because eventually this will pass. How long that's going to be, it would be irresponsible for me to take a guess on, but eventually it will. And when it does, you can have this in your pocket now and be ready to go.
Mm-hmm. I can actually more than happy to share the aspect that I've changed my PPC strategy. Oh, we have our mascot with us today too.
He's our
Producer.
epidemiologist specialist who's just
That's true.
chomping to get in here.
I've changed without expanding my ad campaign on PPC right now. I've gone for terms that I would never be able to touch before because of the price points of them, where I'm doing downtown hotel, visit XYZ, visit whatever, and ones that were $15, $18 sometimes, depending upon time of year, and they're in the dollar teens now. And yes, you're not getting the same conversion, but you're also, when I was talking to 1,000 people, now I'm talking to 10,000 people. So even though it goes down a couple of decimal places, the numbers are still higher than what I was getting with the stuff I was doing. And I've only just really added them to my budget. So the key element is when you shut off your marketing as a cost savings, you're really just shutting off your sign, letting people drive right by you to the people that still have their signs on.
Right.
Yep. And you know, like Dean said, not everyone is afraid to travel. Right. Actually, quite a few people have a desire to travel, and their options have shrunk. You know, Florida is constantly competing for local market with cruise lines, where that's not so much an option for the next 30, 60 days. Right. You know, I look at Myrtle Beach. They're no longer competing with Orlando as aggressively with their drive markets. They have some very similar drive markets to Orlando because Orlando's draw would be the theme parks. You take the theme parks away, it's kind of the same offering, except Myrtle Beach has the beach. So, you know, being thoughtful in your targeting, and then just remembering you may need to change up how you present your value, because it may not be clear to the consumer what your value is in lieu of the things that are currently not available in your market. Right. So, and, you know, but you definitely should not be putting your head in the sand. I can tell you, like the advocacy funnel, you know, we've been watching just to see, have bookings slowed down from referrals from friends and family, and they haven't. We've seen no drip or no drop in booking conversion for the last 2 weeks. On our advocacy funnels, which means people still want to travel. They still want to see normalcy. We're also seeing that advocacy is still happening. The people on your property are sharing about what they're doing. You should be encouraging that, because there's no better way to fight fear than by showing people that, you know, the world isn't truly on fire. This was advice we gave to the Caribbean during Zika. You know, there's no better way to make someone feel a bit more comfortable by showing them what's happening right now.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Very true.
I've been an advocate. I've been convinced that one of the safest things that you can do right now is walk your dog. So pet friendly hotels, they can promote dog walking. You get exercise that boosts your immunity. You get some sunlight, and there's hit and miss on whether sunlight kills viruses and the heat affects coronavirus and so on. It makes your dog happy, so that's a plus. And apparently dogs don't get sick from this thing. So, hey.
Well, recently, the World Health Organization said that the dogs aren't going to give you coronavirus, so who let the dogs out?
There you go.
Yep. I'm just going to ignore that one.
Somebody hit me on it. Just hit
I have kind of two different things here. One, I wanted to go back to Steve's original question that he had put in about packaging, and that kind of ties back to a lot of the things that we're talking about here. I think right now the worst thing that you can do with packaging is try to capitalize on cute terms about what's going on with coronavirus. That's kind of the lazy way to go. Try not to repeat things that are already in the media, because then you're really just feeding into the cycle. But really go back to there you go. Really go back to the customer's actual needs. They need to find some peace of mind in the midst of this crisis, like we talked about earlier. If you already are set up for wellness packaging, it's a great time for wellness packaging. Really kind of trying to target what's on customers' minds, not what's in customers' inboxes. So it's really important that you set yourself apart by going to that core need, not the symptom of the core need. So whatever, that's quite broad, but from a packaging perspective, I think that that's something really interesting. And then I also wanted to ask Dean, because I know this has been a hot topic with many of our hoteliers. that there are OTAs that are kind of in violation of their agreements because they're cutting margins or they're displaying opaque package rates on a public channel, and those, of course, then show up on Metasearch. Are you seeing, or do you anticipate an increase in that as the OTAs, like every other business in the travel industry right now, struggle to keep up? And also wanted to welcome my friend Amy Infante from GetGo.
Yeah.
Hey, Amy, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Amy.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to insert for a second. I have to jump off. I just got like 3 more webinars I have to do now. Thanks, guys. A really good show. Yeah,
It was a lot of fun. Kat, I'm sorry, and Amy, we'll get to you, of course. Thank you for joining us as well. But Kat, if people want to know more, I know we already spoke with Cecil about this, but also with you, if they want to know more about you, reach out to you, and also what AHOA is doing. Where is it they can find you?
Yes, you can always find me through AHOA, but otherwise, if you're trying to get to me directly, kat.m.speaks@gmail.com is the easiest way to get through all my emails. And definitely through the AHOA channels. It looks like we'll be doing a lot more remote things now, a lot more virtual education, so definitely look out for that. And I think that's all right now. It's everything is pushed aside all for COVID, so we're on it, and we hope to offer some more resources for you all. And thank you for you all. I'll be reaching out too to see if you can help us with some of our webinars.
And Kat, thank you for orchestrating Cecil's participation and what have you, and always. So thanks.
Yes, thank you, Kat.
Take care.
Yep, thanks, Kat.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
And before we start back up, I also have to run because I have lots of emails coming in. So
What? No,
I need to help people. So
thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions.
Ed?
People know more about you and Flip to where is it they can find you, sir?
you can go to flip.to. You can find me on social media, Edward StOnge, where I'll be also sharing just insights and things I learn on how people are effectively navigating the next few weeks and months. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much for your time. I think we're going to have to wait for Dean's answer. So we get to Amy, we get to go over and talk with you a little bit as to, hey, what's up with the voice of the B2B stuff? No.
Hey, yeah. No, thanks. I'm excited to be here. My first show. So we've been having a lot of strategic discussions with our hotel partners. Our focus at GetGo is around the B2B space, proactively finding and booking more revenue for our hotel clients. And we really focus on the small and mid-sized companies. So the backyard, the non-global companies. And what we're finding, this is dynamic. Obviously, things are constantly changing, but we did take some statistics down from the week of March 2nd through the 6th, and I've been keeping a pulse with my team. So we have 2 million plus conversations with hotel buyers and decision makers in the small and medium-sized business sector, the non-mandated travel programs that are out there, and the feedback that we're receiving in those conversations from customers is that, they're still traveling. Lots of project business, certainly schools closing is definitely going to affect the small and mid-sized businesses and how flexible they are to conduct their business the way they have been. So we're keeping a close eye on that. However, my team has been booking business. We're managing small and mid-sized portfolios for chains and brands and hotels that are out there. And we are still seeing revenue being booked. We are uncovering future opportunities. The consensus is that this will pass. And when it does, there, like you said, that pent up need will be there. And so we've been talking a lot with our hotels back to the mental mindset. Sales is a mindset game, honestly. And we have to make sure that we continue to keep our sellers in and protect that energy. And so, I just put a post out to my audience about sales leaders. All leaders really need to protect their energy during this time and ensure that to lead your team in the best way possible, because we must focus on what we can control today, and that is to take the action right now so that we can the best recovery countries specifically that are still traveling. Certainly the small and medium-sized businesses, it's very fragmented. There's all kinds of businesses within that segment, that sector. And we're seeing it all across the board, from retail new openings, continuing on, construction, consulting projects, anything, of course, that centers around medical. So sellers and teams need to be focused on what they can control and who's out there still traveling. And it's important to share that information and data. It shifts depending on the market that you're in, obviously. But I think the dialogue has to continue around that. Let's focus on what we can control.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. My perspective on a lot of them is you've got to look at like Maslow's needs hierarchy. And I think the more you can start putting people at ease with, here's what we're doing to cover your health and safety and security, which is always kind of the base level, that's critical. And again, knowing that your local companies and the provider, the people who really need help, that you're there to provide a resource to help them out. That's hugely, I mean, people are going to wind up, and you wind up with these, kind of disaster scenarios. They wind up with lifelong friendships and bonds, and who knows, new businesses, and all these great things come out of, people working together under duress. But yeah, it's a huge opportunity to do some great things. But you're right. It's all the little stuff with the smaller guys, not the big, hey, maybe we can go pitch the American Medical Association to do all of their whatevers, 2 years from now when this is over. That's going to be tough. These guys are in survival mode. So
true. And Amy, thank you for being, but one thing we didn't get to mention is that Amy was going to be our guest host today.
That's right.
From Mel Gibson. No. So you were an amazingly good sport about this, and we will make this up to you, I promise, because we want to take some opportunity for you to be able to be featured and talk a little bit more in depth about what it is that you do. And as you're mentioning, the B2B component of all this as well. So thank you so much for being a great sport about all that. With the B2B aspect of it, it's kind of interesting the way you're talking about this, is because everyone's talking about the transient impact of this. And of course, there's the group impacts and so forth, but there's like the 7 stages of denial and so forth. Well, there's also processes of these kind of shattering events. And you're talking about stuff that's kind of like third step down. It's when we get past the initial shock of barren transient and we get past the shock of lost business. Then it's like, where's all my business people? Where's all my communications at that level? And then they're going to realize that happened all at the same time. So you're kind of actually ahead of the conversation in lots of ways by talking about, if you're not already thinking about it because so much is going on, you're just getting so many lefts, you're begging for a right, that you need to incorporate this into your dialogue now. You need to start being proactively engaged with what you're talking about now, because it's only going to be a longer road to get back on later. Am I kind of right?
Absolutely. our business, absolutely. And in sales, I mean, the dialogue has to remain proactive. We talk about this in good times, and we can't wait for something tragic to happen to decide to take action and be proactive. And, we have a whole study that we did from the past 3 years, and uncovered that the moment you start to prospect, the moment you start to have conversations with customers, the business actually starts to flow about 7 months out. So based on 3 years of voice of the customer interaction and data and pulling insights from the work that we've done, it's a 7+ month rule, essentially. So today, those sales teams that are sitting there, like I just say, do not be paralyzed by the news. Still have, obviously we can't be tone deaf to what's going on, right? And we need to be compassionate and lead with heart. But we still need to be thinking ahead, because what we do today, we will be living in those results now 9 months from now. So we have to think about that in good times and in times like today, right? It doesn't matter. That's the message that I've been taking to the streets for 14 years now with our business, to squash the commoditization of hotels, right? So I think this is a big opportunity. It's a test of our resolve. It's an opportunity to look at things that we may have been kind of sweeping under the rug for a while. I've been hearing a lot of talks about, looking at our contracts, talking to customers about those contracts. There's a lot of things that are creeping up through this issue that will ensure that if we actually tackle them today, it won't come back, the next time something like this happens. And so, one of the things we talked about on the, with our customers is really, document back during 9/11. You didn't document the things that were happening back then. Definitely document what's going on with your sales funnel today. Remember who's traveling, all of that good stuff. It's really important to keep track.
That is excellent, excellent advice. But in something, ironically, none of us brought up in our conversation we had, Bob and Cecil. What better way to keep track? If you've lived through something like this, dear diary, today was sunny. Just
yeah. But if you have really good detailed, let me tell you, this may not be the last pandemic, right? Now, hopefully they're really spread out and it's 30 years from now. But again, if you have the detail and going, well, here's how things kind of ramped up and here's what we did and these are the curve, all of a sudden the next time
wish we had done this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you start going through those processes of of evaluating. Here what our actions were, and these are outcomes. We made some mistakes, and here's what we're going to do to avoid them. All of a sudden, the next time you can start benchmarking, going, hey, this isn't as bad. Everybody's freaking out, but this is not as bad as it was before. So, and here are the things that worked. So let's try to do more of whatever. So.
Yeah, Dean, there's a question on the board that I think you just unceremoniously dipped out with. Wi-Fi issues. You didn't want to answer him. Lily, sorry, you're breaking up. And Lily, I think Dean, I think you heard the question, but basically, these evil people that are taking advantage of the opportunity and dumping rates they shouldn't be into the market. Are you seeing more of it, less of it? Are you worried about it? Is it just the same old, same old?
Well, it's always a concern for certain because you have one wholesaler industry that pops. Let's use a MoMA. We can pick on them because they're gone. Right. So everybody hated a MoMA and they finally went away. But guess what? There's 3 other ones popping up to take their place. So that will never stop. But I tell you what is happening right now is the OTAs are pulling back, specifically Metasearch, are really pulling back on a lot of their aggressiveness and participation in Metasearch. Not to misunderstand, you're never going to pull up a hotel. Just go to Google and say hotels in New York City, pick your favorite hotel. You're going to see OTAs on there. Enough of them not on there. But case in point, we discovered on Trivago in particular that all of a sudden they had pulled back. So whereas before what we were getting for, let's say $1 CPC or $2 CPC, whatever the number is, what we were getting from that price before suddenly skyrocketed because we no longer had competition as much from the OTAs. And so we had to account for that because now all of a sudden the number of clicks were increasing and that changes the way that you're doing budgets. So if anything right now, OTAs are pulling back. And that's largely because, keep in mind, they get paid on commission, right? So sooner or later, they've got to have a room booking just like you do. And if people aren't booking those rooms, then guess what? That doesn't do them any good. Yeah. They don't want to deal with cancellations any more than a hotel does. So you're seeing a lot of a level playing field when it comes to that.
Right. And those advertising programs, because they're out there, if people don't have entertainment, like to watch March Madness and things like that, to go to all of a sudden, they're going to be online and they may start dreaming about travel, which is great. But if they're clicking through on all these ads and not booking, that's a huge risk, right? For the OTAs. So so they're dropping that stuff out. So I think it's a huge time for hotels to be able to really start doing some direct business and kind of find those gaps and establish a foothold, and certainly pulling back on what can we cut? Well, let's cut our sales and marketing department because nobody's booking. They'll just stop. That's been proven out over time, not necessarily the best when things start to recover. So all you're doing is digging yourself a hole that when things recover, you then have to climb out of the hole. So,
It's interesting looking at this from a leisure perspective along the lines of what Amy was saying on the group side of things is really understanding your lead time, not your booking window, but your actual planning window, because I think that, it's actually easier to grasp this on the group side, and yet we still don't do a great job of it. So it's really important to know that, number one, within about, 2 weeks, I know I'm going to have cabin fever because guess what? All my conferences just got canceled. But what will now probably be known as the last standing conference that I got to attend before panic broke out at Navigate last week. There was a session that I attended, and what really stuck with me was you need to create a conversion that's not a book now offer for the dreamers and planners on your direct website, because people are out there researching trips now. My guess would be the daydreaming phase is actually going to escalate in the midst of coronavirus, because everybody's going to be like, oh my gosh, I got to get out of here. So while it's not going to solve your short term, and to be honest, not that many things are going to solve your short term. We kind of just have to, buckle up and get ready for the ride for the next couple of months. You need to start thinking more proactively about when business does come back. Have you captured that traveler's interest? Have you captured some sort of conversion like read our blog or join our newsletter, or here's our Instagram page where we put out all the best beaches in the world, or something to get them to actually continue dialoguing with you so that when they are ready to travel, they automatically think of you. And
you make
going to the OTAs.
You make excellent points out of that same conference. And I know it's not the first time this has been brought up, but there's a higher satisfaction of planning than there is in the reality of the travel. That more people enjoy the expectation of what they're about to do than the actual event itself. And we know if Ed were here, he'd reiterate this. There's two traveling experiences, the one you share, loving it, and then the other one, like, damn, taxi smells. So the reality versus the storyline. But to your point, there is a great strategy out of that. We have now people where they didn't have time for what we were creating as social dialogue or content, to let that stretch and really simmer, percolate as they're getting cabin fever of, I got to get out of here. Where do I want to go? And we're in that messaging and we're in that context. And we start giving them and just feeding them super cool. Man, when this breaks free, I'm going to go to such and such and have the biggest such and such on the biggest, nicest beach of such and such or mountain of such and such. And you're just going to be able to feed that. And it's just going to, so by the time that pent up thing comes out, it's like lions out of the gate. Boom. Where's the Christians?
Not the best analogy. Yeah, there are certain outcomes there, Lauren, that immediately after you release those lines.
Okay, let's get back up. Where's the deer?
There's our PR crisis expert. I think we need one, not for coronavirus though.
Just for Lauren. Yeah.
Just for Lauren. Yeah, I just need one. Yeah, just something I can hang my hat on. But those are very excellent.
Just think, you now have all these people who are probably working from home, right? They've got a telecommute for their job. Their kids are not in school, right? So there's going to be a lot of stuff. And I think Lily said, right, it's going to be cabin fever. If you're a property that's even, a little bit outside of town, I don't know, there's a nature preserve near you. Stuff that's, low risk. It's outside, like Dean was saying, taking your dog, for a walk sort of thing. If there are things where, oh yeah, they have really cool nature trails and there's scavenger hunts to go find things, or, have these people go play golf or whatever the case
Robert,
may
do you want
be.
to emphasize your point by starting playing the Baby Shark song? Baby Shark, Shark, Baby Shark. Glad you listened to that.
Yeah. So anyway, they're looking for.
I'll be running out of the door. Give me the virus. I gotta go.
That's right. But if a hotel can start providing, hey, these are great family bonding, stress reducing experiences, like you're saying, with wellness and things like that. Yeah, that's great. It can be for the family market, can for a couple, whatever the case may be. There are dozens of niches of people who are going to be desperate to come. And the big thing is it safe? Is it clean? It's like, oh yeah, that's great. I'm not taking a risk. Let's go do that. Right. If the industry can communicate that, and again, it's not a national marketing campaign from Hyatt. or something like that, that does, if you can do it on the local level within the drive market, that's going to be great stuff. And again, is it going to fill your hotel? No, but you're going to have a base of business and probably win over some people who are going to say, hey, have you ever done such and such? These are great guys. And boy, spotless. The hotel was spotless, right?
So I have a question.
Right.
Renee just popped in, and because we're canceling our trip to Colorado for Curate, mainly just out of concerns. We have a lot of friends here that are retirees. And if we were to go off there right now where there's a medical and so forth and so on, it's not that I'm not saying I would love to attend. I would curate and everything else like this. When we come back, we would probably, out of abundance of caution, just tell our friends we can't see them for at least 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not much fun. I mean, in all honesty, and not knowing the certainty of the attendance in Curate anyway at this point, as any conference, I'm not trying to discourage anybody to continue to go to Curate. It's just, to us, it was like, it's not worth it for us to do that at this point. So what American Airlines has done, this is the question, is when we went to go to cancel, they've now sent us an email saying, we'd love to upgrade you. Please. Right. So,
yeah.
And here's some extra points, and here's all this. And I'm sitting there going, we tried that a little bit with cancellations transient at the hotel. Like, hey, can we get a credit? And if we keep the credit for you, we'll let your rate go up 30%. We'll still let you book at the rate you already booked at.
Right.
So
that's a great process. That's a great policy.
We tried some of that. We got some of those people, and then we had some people that we did offer upgrades and so forth. But what do you think is the real effect? Is that even a worthy tool at this point? Are we just kind of beating a dead horse at this moment, that we're just trying to hang on to glimpses of revenue because where they still can cancel? We're not changing the scenario that, but once you're locked in, you're still going to get stuck. We're still going to let them cancel. So is it really helping us?
From my perspective, especially on the leisure, and I actually spoke to this in a blog that I released earlier this Monday, if somebody's canceling because they're worried about coronavirus, no offer is going to make that guest stay unless you have the package that says we can guarantee you will never get coronavirus or spread it to anybody else. And I'm pretty sure that's not on the market, but if it is, it may cost you more than either Purell or toilet paper. So just a heads up.
Bundle the hazmat suit in, Lily.
Right.
I mean, you gotta really.
I was literally thinking this morning, create creatively and wondered if it would be insensitive to have a toilet paper package where you get to go home with
hand sanitizers.
Yeah,
I wouldn't get 2 free if you stay with us now. Yeah,
members.
In all reality, like, number one, hotels should be prepared for guests to steal toilet paper.
Oh yeah,
just a heads up.
Interesting.
And also, nothing with discounting, and this is why we're really encouraging everybody, our clients and the industry in general, not to discount any more than you normally would. If you typically would run a 20% off deal for a limited time frame that's standardly low demand, go ahead, that's normal. But if you're the first one to tank your rates, you're just going to start that pricing war that we've seen so many times before. If your market does it, we understand, you can't just be the only property that's high either, but you should, at least in relation to your market, maintain a similar positioning.
Okay, now that brings up the simple answer you already gave, which is don't be the first. Nobody wins going to the bottom. Got all that. Those are fine. More of an advanced question, and I think this was brought by Ellie earlier, I'm pretty sure. Great strategy. You don't want to be top man on the totem pole, but you have some hotels, some very good 5-star hotels. They can't play and swim in the pool. You can't take a hotel that's getting $600 and $700 a night and drop it down to the $150, $200 range, because that's where the rest of the market's now sitting. What are some things?
Well, what can, and some will, as the really scary part.
There's an exception to every answer. I'm not saying that there may be a level of where that's the only survivable zone that they can be in. I understand that. But what are some steps between that and where they are, in your mind, from a advice perspective? Because you get faced with this stuff.
In this particular scenario, I wouldn't look at the general market. I'd look at the similar market. So you're looking at other luxury hotels within your market. If for some reason you're the only one, you should, ideally, you've never priced against these people, right? Or if you have, maybe you've automatically sat $100 above them. That's the kind of relationship that I'm recommending that hotels remain in. If your comp set drops $200, then you might need to drop $200. But that doesn't mean that you're now the lowest and you drop $300. So basically, you're looking at a moving proportion that you want to stay within your similar placement to your market, your comp set, whoever you have always measured against up till now, and not necessarily be that luxury hotel that's trying to compete with the local courtyard because you're desperate. Because again, some people might take advantage of it. You may shift some share temporarily, but the long-term damage you're doing in that scenario is much, much worse. And guess what? The courtyard has room to lower their rate. They're going to freak out that you're playing in their pool. They're going to lower their rate. The next tier down is going to be freaked out that they're playing in their pool. And so that's exactly what happened in 2009, 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, again, I mean, I don't want to be a doomsday sayer, but guys, it's going to suck. The end. There is nothing that we can do to control the fact that there's less demand, other than the most important thing that you can do right now is a smart marketing and spending strategy. So guess what? If you're marketing heavily in international airport markets that require a flight to get to you, pull back that spending. Spend that pay-per-click specifically on drive markets for your particular hotel, where people can actually get to you without having to board a plane, because I can almost guarantee you 70% of the people who aren't traveling are because they think they might get quarantined at their destination, whereas if they drive, there's much less risk to them of being stuck away from home. So there's some security in that, I think, that you can really play off of, and make sure that you're also spending correctly in other areas. You know, if you've got staff that's not busy, are there tasks that could support your sales team? Can they start doing some calling on their behalf? Are there other ways that you can put these people to work to some degree, assuming that you have the cash flow? And also just make sure that you have a healthy cash flow plan for, I'd say 6 months is a good time frame to look at, just to be on the safe side.
Dean, go ahead.
You know, one of the things I would add to that too is you mentioned what happened back in 08 and 09 when you saw this, you know, very similar routine here. And so you saw these full service hotels that normally ran, let's say $200, $300 per night, now trying to compete in that pool with the courtyard at maybe 150 or 125. And so great. So now I'm at $125 per night. Okay. But what did I as a hotel have to do in order to be able to sell my rooms at that? Well, I had to run on a skeleton crew. Right, so I cut staff. I've got fewer waiters in the restaurant. I've got one bartender. My housekeeping is full, whatever the case may be. So now, as a consumer, I have this problem because I'm looking at this going, holy cow! I can go to this 5-star hotel at the price of a 2-star hotel, but I've still got my 5-star expectations. I still think when I get there, I'm getting the full service Marriott experience here, right? And then I arrive and I get the limited service hotel experience. And what ends up happening, I go and I start writing bad reviews. I complain about this isn't what I wanted. I couldn't get service. The pool was dirty, whatever the case may be. And now all of a sudden your online reputation tanks.
Right.
And now you've got a bigger problem, because when you come out of all of this, guess what? Everybody's going to start looking at that kind of stuff. By way of comparison, you know, if I am a 2-star hotel and I gave you that 5-star experience, I can come out looking ahead. So, you know, along those lines, you know, don't cut those rates beyond what you can afford to do so. You've got to have that reputation. You've got to have that level of parity that's out there. If you are a 5-star hotel and you are worth $400, then be worth $400. That's what you do, right? And along those lines too, in fact, in 08 and 09, I was working in guest feedback programs, reputation management, and I posed this question to people last week, and I got mixed reactions. So I'm posing it to the group here as well too. But I see an opportunity at a time like this for you to mine your content. So if you've got people that have talked about your hotel as being super clean, the housekeeping was fantastic, and so on, they're talking now, of course, not the ones that talk about you being bad, but you got people that are talking about how good you do in that area. Boy, I want to promote that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think from the industry, they need to really express, here's what, you know, hotel rooms are generally very, very clean, and certainly more clean than most people's houses, right?
Yeah.
sort of thing. Now, there is a risk of who was in there before, but if you're doing good cleaning processes, I would think the industry would be all over that, and the airline industry has, and all these others. Hotel industry has been silent, which is just a hugely disappointing, because it's a big opportunity to, again, set people's minds at ease that, oh, maybe it isn't dangerous, and particularly competing against, short-term rentals and Airbnbs and things like that. Huge opportunity. They're like, oh, we need to compete against them. It's like, well, this seems to be an opportunity. And yeah.
So, Amy, looked like you were ready to raise your hand on something. Sorry, we sometimes you have to have some sharp elbows in our group here, because we'll just keep on talking. So just nudge Robert out of the way, poke me in the eye, and just say, "Hey." Dean's used to it, so he just knows that. Just like
you should see Lily get so mean. It's really
she does.
I
was just gonna say along the lines. I think every company, business right now needs to have a short-term plan to bob and weave, right? What we're working on with a lot of our partners is a strategy that we came up with, 3 days ago before school closures and things like that is not as applicable. It's not going to be as effective today. But we come up with something new. You got to be very creative and think outside the box as a sales organization, to bob and weave and figure things out for the short term, but do not ignore the long-term plan. And so what I've seen be very effective is for companies to have a task force type situation currently, meaning an initiative, right? Okay, so we're going to pay attention to the bobbing and weaving, and then a long-term proactive plan for ensuring that your pipeline stays robust. Because there are companies out there that are willing to talk right now about their plans for Q3, Q4. Everyone is wanting this to end. I think 2 weeks ago or was it just last week? God, time. I'm in a time warp these days, right? I was just traveling. My flights were full. I was in 6 different planes just last week, and we were talking as a team and discussing different strategies. And then this week, kind of a different story. We're starting to see more of a dip. And so, but the companies that we're speaking to on the phone, thousands of conversations in a week, are still planning for their future. They have to, right? We have to stay positive and focus on the things that are going to be coming down the pike. So I think a short-term plan that has to be incredibly flexible and agile, as well as a long-term focus to continue your pipeline, continue having those conversations. Sales professionals on the ground, you are the eyes, the ears, and the voice of the customer right now. Leadership within the company needs to hear that information so that we can strategize and put tactics in place for the long term.
And I took the liberty of dropping in a link to a blog that I released earlier this week as well.
Unabashed self-promotion? This is totally allowed. What is happening?
No, but really, as we're talking, you might think we were discussing this blog because it happens to hit on these particular areas, as well as what Amy was just talking about with the long term. So for those who were trying to furiously take notes, there you go. I did it for you on Monday.
Yeah, and Mike, would you like to join us as well? We still have, the fun of this show is the fact that we want dialogue. This is not about making agendas or sandboxes or what have you. It's opportunity to take professionals like we have with Amy and Dean and everybody else that gets to join us and say, hey, look, this is what we do. This is what we know. To Dean's point about some of these things, I'm going to quote Mike Tyson when I said, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face. And what we thought what we were going to do to handle these things is by far different than, just like you pointed out, last week we were traveling. I was seeing Lily in San Antonio at a conference, and yes, we knew this was happening, but to the speed and the aggravation that were going on, no camera though. I prefer to reach out later. Just listen now. Okay, no problems. We appreciate your contribution, Mike. Now we're facing the fact that, there's no sports. There's nothing. Who would have ever a week ago even said that we're going to cancel every major sporting event that's going on? March Madness? kidding me?
I called March Madness.
I know, Robert, but you're weird, so it's not counting. you were walking around with your scythe and your hood for a month now. The end is near. The end is near.
So much. Yeah.
I think that's part of what happened too with our industry is for many weeks now, this has been something that was happening to other people. It was happening somewhere else. And then all of a sudden it happens in your backyard and you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And the problem is why,
or your hotel, like you're watching it elsewhere going, and then boom, your hotel, like, oh my gosh, the phone just lit up. Stuart, who's not here with us, I get to join his podcast today. Actually, I'm going to be recording
on the podcast today. Oh dear.
I have my own podcast to do. By the way, Lily, you have your podcast to do. Okay.
Ready.
We are starting a new podcast. Lily's starting a new podcast with me called Hospitality Revenue Management, just so you know.
Oh.
Dean, if you want to do it, we can do Hospitality Metasearch, but I'm just saying, just out there. And Robert, you already know Hospitality Data. It's out there.
Wow.
But anyways, Stuart was talking about.
I got to tune into that.
Yeah. Oh, no,
do you have like a bucket of chilled beers there in your?
Yeah, well, I hope so. I might have more stronger stuff. But anyway, it just now hit Myrtle Beach. His customers, his guests, are now calling on, holy geez, I'm getting waves of cancellations.
Absolutely.
Waves of cancellations. And Stephanie's husband, who runs a large hotel in Seattle, I was talking with her when she said she couldn't make the show today, which regrettably she missed, because talk about being her home team, ownership, AHOA, brand. Come on, that's Stephanie. Anyway, she was talking about her husband. They're down to 7% occupancy. Yeah. 1,200 room hotel.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's crushing.
Hey, can I run through a couple? Okay, one thing.
Go ahead.
This virus doesn't know anything about borders or anything like that, right? It's just it's going where it's going. It spreads, the way it spreads. So if you look at other countries and kind of what happened there, you can get a good idea. So Robin Rossman from STR is the managing director for the UK has been putting out amazing data, and I really wish STR would be putting out the same stats for the US. It'd be very helpful. But you look at it, New Zealand, Indonesia, UK, Australia are all down about 10%. This is in last week's occupancy change, right? The US was down about 7%, something like that. So we aren't quite where those are. And again, Europe's ahead of us, Asia's ahead of us. That's fine. You start looking into minus 15 to 25%. You're in Israel, Egypt, Spain, India, Ireland, places like that. Negative 25 to 40%. Saudi Arabia, Czech Republic, Croatia, France, Germany, UAE are all off 25 to 35%. Down 40 to 70%, Singapore, Japan, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, also Greece and Switzerland, and Thailand, right? So again, these are getting 40 to 70% off occupancy declines. Amazing. Minus over 70%, China off 78%, Italy off 78%, South Korea off 78%. I would argue get ready for a 78% drop, because you just see how these dominoes are falling. And again, the big red flag for me is the lack of testing. I mean, the U.S. tested like 177 people this week or something, like 117. I can't remember. A very, very low number. Now, all these local testing clinics are now being authorized to go do it and have our own tests in these hospitals, which will boom that number up great. But until we know that denominator, we have no idea, right? You can kind of say, here are how many people who came in and got into the hospital, but that's what happened in China, right? They're going, oh, this is bad. And then all of a sudden they started counting people who went, oh, the only way you got counted was if you were admitted to the hospital and you were sick, and people weren't admitted to the hospital because they couldn't get tested. And it all of a sudden went from 4,000 cases to like 15,000 cases, just pow, right? So, unfortunately the stats, because I don't have a dog in this fight. I want it to be over. I don't want it to happen, but the stats are really ugly. And This may be a really, really tough time for people having to really adjust their behaviors for not just a week or two, right?
No,
People are start feeling okay when the new cases go down to zero. Wuhan and China had 22 new cases yesterday, right? That's great, and people are coming out and they're feeling okay, and they'll be back and running at it. But also, what did they do to grab this thing? What did South Korea do? We aren't doing any of that. So
let's take the resources we have on the call right now, and those that are in our chat room as well for this. You have Lily with revenue, you have Amy with B2B, you have Dean with Metasearch, you have I don't know what you're for. Anyway,
I just make up crap.
So here's the situation. We got both of the leading associations presidents on talking about where there's the uncertainty factor of this in the sense of durability. We don't know if it's a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day. But let's take timeline impacts. We know fundamentally our summer market is changed to drive market only at best.
Yeah.
Some travel flight, mostly domestic. Those are just fair statements. Even if they lift the restrictions on international travel, there's probably a diminished interest at best on exercising that. Yeah. So to Lily's point, from a revenue point of view, keep your tier value to what you have and adjust your prices accordingly, but also make sure you're talking to your marketing team. There's a lot, and I'll say this from firsthand experience, of people that don't know what their marketing team does.
Right.
They don't know what campaigns they are set up for. They just know that they write a check and somebody over there magically makes Peter Pan appear on the internet. So getting that question to be asked is probably a fundamental short-term decision. I know, Amy, from a B2B side, you're talking about reaching out and immediately communicating with your current relationships to create a resonant sounding board, a client advocacy communication of, we know your concerns. We know that you have to stop doing certain things. We understand that. Let's create a dialogue of how we are going to be picking up the pieces from this, not knowing how soon we can do that. So to that end, we bring that into it. From your point of Dean, you're talking about the fact that now more than ever is the need to control your narration, your voice, your direct channel. OTA, without the benefit of getting their monies from selling us, are probably going to be reevaluating how they sell us at very least. So taking that chance to grab in. From my perspective of marketing, I'm grabbing land where I was fighting for inches. I can gather miles of voice in my market right now. And as long as you're not shy about maintaining your marketing, leaving the light on, you can do that with existing budgets. You don't have to be much. So that augments what Lily's saying. Robert, you're saying because of the uncertainty of the true depth of impact, this, even in a short term, if we get any business, be drive as it may in summer, we have to look at what you're saying, Amy, third and fourth quarter is, what is the push into that? We know it's going to develop a pent-up demand. We know that some people will just inherently travel for opportunity's sake, okay? But how do we begin crafting our message of anticipation for those, maybe say the third quarter when fall begins to hit? Maybe this diminishes because like a fluid changes based on seasonality. Now, maybe it's going to come back a little higher. Who knows? What are some things between all of us that we would say, what do we answer questions in third quarter? We kind of can answer already summer. What's third quarter, fourth quarter in your world looking like? And Lily, well, start with revenue management, I think.
You know, right now we're not seeing a lot of impact either with our clients or in responses to our survey, which I posted a little bit ago in case any of our watchers would like to participate. But we are trying to just kind of gather more information around that. And so far, everything that we're seeing, it looks like people are canceling for March and April pretty much everything. I would say, again, to Amy's point, you know, most of the guidelines around gatherings that are being put out start at 500 or so. So I would look at any groups with attendance of anything close to 500 and just go ahead and assume that those are going to cancel for March and April and strategize appropriately. But I would also say that there's some buzz now about, you know, are people working on a cure? How quickly is that going to come out? There's a lot of speculation around that. But I think that when they find some treatments or some vaccines for this, that things are going to start to come back relatively quickly in terms of restrictions, very much like an H1N1 kind of scenario that we saw a while back. But I think that right now it's safe to plan for Q3 and Q4 to be more or less normal, keeping in mind there may be some overflow, but my hope, my little optimistic part of my brain here, is that any canceled programs for March or April, try to rebook them in Q3 and Q4, letting them know that we'll continue to monitor the situation as it develops. I know AHOA didn't cancel. They moved their conference to August. So I think that that's kind of the smart way to approach it right now, because we've talked a little bit about pent-up demand, and we may continue to see that, whether it's leisure, corporate, people still need to get things done. So it's great to plan around that happening in Q3 and Q4 right now, and maybe with about a 10% variance in either direction from what you were originally anticipating.
Mm-hmm. Amy, from a business-to-business perspective, what kind of communication do you think you're going to have with that constituency as to business travel, group travel, expectations of the ability to do business with you in the latter part of the year? What do you think some of the verbiage and ways you're going to approach that?
So we have shared quality questions to ask your customers right now. So I'm not a very good multitasker, Lily, so I can't post my blog to the chat.
I'll find you. I got it.
I need more practice, apparently, but quality questions to ask customers who are in the midst of a travel halt. Because we are still reaching out to customers in the backyards of our hotel customers and speak what's going on. You have to be able to ask the quality questions. The risk is, right? What could get in the way of this not moving forward? The question is the answer is pretty obvious to most right now, but you still have to ask the question, because every business has their own, especially in the small and mid-size sector. So you still have to ask. The entrepreneurs are all handling this in their own way, and all they're looking at this from their own business perspective and their growth. So when you're speaking from a small and mid-sized customer, you're asking those questions that you might think the answer is obvious, but they still need to be asked. But we are seeing positive opportunity out there for Q3 and Q4 still. I think we're in right now. It's only going to get worse. It's kind of in a wait and see, but they're still very hopeful. And I will just say that you want your sales team to be hopeful and positive. I always have to hesitate. Like, am I coming across as a Pollyanna and like, oh, it's going to get better? But it's important is looking at this from a positive outlook and a good mindset that this will come back and that there are actions we can take today.
Mm-hmm. Dean, from a direct perspective, what do you think are some opportunities for the latter part of the year?
Well, I think we have to remember a couple of things that are happening. First of all, when we talk about latter part of the year, what immediately happens is now we're talking about moving into low season, right? Q4 is always the low period where your bookings and everything drops off naturally. So keeping that in mind. But also understanding what's happening right now is that everybody's cutting back on their marketing dollars, right? While marketing dollars are usually allocated at the beginning of the year, you've got a budget as here's what the marketing dollars are, especially with one of the big brands. So what's going to happen? Well, those marketing dollars are getting pushed to Q3, Q4, and so on. So Q3 and Q4, when it comes to your digital marketing landscape as a whole, is going to be very competitive. I'm making some assumptions, of course, that things get better, et cetera, so on. So you better know what you're doing when you get to that point, right? And that's why I keep saying now is the time to get your ducks in a row, figure out what you want to do, and have some historical data in place, because it's going to be very cutthroat when everything comes out the gate again. People have marketing dollars to spend all of a sudden that they probably have to burn before the end of the year. Mm-hmm. It's probably a use it or lose it scenario, right? They've
use it or lose it scary in that scenario. You're right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So yeah, guess what? Everybody's going to be doing that. So you have to figure out where you're going to be in that picture as well.
Yeah, very true. Mr. Dr. Data Doom and Gloom with the cowl in the sky. What's going to happen, dude?
I don't know. Nobody knows. I just look at the factors of, right now, actually the number of active cases globally, China spiked, right? And then things were tailing off. Well, we're now back up at that level. It's like, 60,000 active cases and things like that. Should I go through to really depress everybody on the downside? If things are worse than we think, because everybody wants it to be really good and go away. If things go south, this is really bad, because you look at Italy as the prime example of that, right? Their hospital system has basically been overrun. So all of a sudden their fatality rate is like 6% versus this, maybe a half it should be, maybe whatever, maybe 0.5% is kind of where it is, which is 5 times worse than the regular flu, right? But those seem to be the numbers. 0.5% to 1% is probably, like, if you counted everybody, where things hang out. And it also skews older, right? If you're 80, it's like 15%, right? That's bad. So, you start scaling from 60 to 80, it starts graduating from, I can't remember, maybe 3% up to 15%. But if the hospital system gets overrun, that's bad. So what I'm looking at as the key factors is, one is you have to have tests available so you can test everybody, right? Or at least all the prime suspects, that sort of thing. My money would be on, at some point, for public areas, that people are going to get their temperature taken when they're entering. Like, you're going to have your doorman with a thermometer checking people, and certainly somebody at the staff entrance going, you've got a fever, you're going wherever, but now you don't know where to send people, right? There's no place to send them. So I think those sorts of things are going to wind up happening. But if the hospitals start getting overrun, all bets are off, and this just really gets very, very bad. And you look at with Italy's situation, and they were actually testing a lot more people per capita than we have been, and that's very scary.
I'm going to be a little bit more pragmatic on it, that I think there's factors that we're generalizing that are more specific to our task. If you want to take a look at Italy as a population is diminishing. They were already aged. All right. There already was predictions as to the end of Italy as a culture if they don't change their population growth. Okay. Yeah. And they were older. Also look at their cultural. They don't have rest homes. They have villages and communities. People are interacting and checking with each other. So the aging capability is much more pronounced to an already higher susceptibility age group. So there are factors that skew those numbers. But that being said, we also have a sharp edge to our knife internally. We as a culture take our old people and dump them into little homes.
Right. Concentrate them together. Yeah.
So, we're going to see methodologies where we don't get to visit them. They have to visit us. Literally, they have to be wheeled out. And at that point, when they get wheeled back in, they don't get to see anybody else. So there's going to be cost factors of engagements and so forth. From a travel perspective, we're going to have to rethink how we make this messaging to people for those who still have to travel versus who want to travel. And we need to pepper that in our dialogue with whatever channels we communicate with them. We talked about building anticipation earlier as a positive. We may also have to infuse in our communication affirmation as well. Methods and steps that we're taking to address their concerns, not the ostrich in the head in the sand kind of thing, and not the Life of Brian singing on the cross. We're somewhere in between the two of those things. We have to be truthful, but also realistic, and with like not be a Pollyanna but also hopeful that we're working towards a better day. So with all of that, I say yes. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. Planning for the worst means 2020 is a dump. Just it's a crushed out, done. Anything in the pipeline should be paused. If anybody thinks that they have to live past 6 months and it doesn't look like they're going to, make those decisions now to keep your cash flow high, to maintain operational capabilities. And to your point, when the market does begin to come to the better days, have the money to be in the market. Nothing's worse than market coming back, Dean, and we squeezed every penny and drank every last drop of water to survive and not lose our crew, only to now have to get into the market and have no gas left in the car to finish the race. You know, so there's a balance act between both of those. Right now, we're in the opportunistic phase. You know, for what I'm doing with clients, we're taking advantage of the fact that everybody else is shuttering their windows and closing their doors and putting moratoriums on travel and spend. Great, give me all the land voice I want. I'll take it. People are going to eventually wake up if this lasts too long with, I got to do something, and they're going to come back into the market. And they're going to stumble around and try to take, you know, it's just like the picture of the apocalypse. You know, when you go to the grocery store, eventually the grocery store, because it's not getting restocked, runs out of stuff. So where else are you going to find resources? Where else are you going to find business? And so you can take advantage of those things now, but in the future, you got to think long term. You're going to have to steal your brother's bread. You're going to have to be stealing what demand is available, and you're going to have to address it in a way that gets it to they stay with you and not them. And regrettably, those $400 hotels, if they want to keep their lights on, no matter the case, might have to be a $150 hotel. But to your point, Dean, don't lose the value of what you represent in having to do that. Don't that's a bad term to say. Don't reduce yourself to that level of society.
Don't become a $150 hotel. Exactly.
Yeah.
Ratio, right? If you're twice as expensive generally, right, as the overall market, you can also look at it that way and go, okay, it's 150, and we're normally the market's at 300, and we're at 600 or something. That's fine. You can adjust down, but getting in there with them just has. No, and it's funny. The stock market, everybody's looking back. Oh my God, biggest single day drop since '87. I remember '87 because I was heading marketing planning for Four Seasons, and that's when we came up with our this discounting does not work strategy, and had to beat it into a lot of hotel general managers' heads, like, stop doing this. This is insane. And again, we had enough data from the 1984 oil crisis, right? Where people don't remember, you guys are probably all too young. There were huge people in line for an hour and a half trying to get gasoline for their car, right? Yeah. Crazy stuff. But we looked at all of that and went, hey, guess what? When we cut rates on the hotels, it didn't help. It made the hole deeper, and then we had to climb out of it. And Four Seasons still uses that same strategy, right? It works.
I really like to.
Go ahead, Dean. I'm sorry.
I really like to also see hotels, and well, not just hotels, but companies in general, that during a time like this, invest in training of your staff.
Absolutely.
It's really hard to train your staff when your hotel is full, right? So if you've got people that are around doing nothing right now, invest in training.
I'll add to that from a call that I had this morning. I'm on a board for a sales training organization, and they're trying to craft their messaging. And I said, look, here's the decisions, having lived through 9/11 in particular, being similar to what we're looking at now, a fear of travel. And I said, I had to make decisions between keeping Susie or Mary. Susie's a great revenue manager. Back then it wasn't revenue management, but just, but that's all she knows how to do. Mary, on the other hand, is an okay revenue manager, but I can also put her on the front desk. And I can keep her a little bit longer because I can put her on two different schedules now. I don't need as much of this. And as though she's better than her, she doesn't have the ability to be plugged in elsewhere. So cross-training your teams now so that they can provide multiple value to you, can keep the integrity of your service levels, but also job security for them. Their willingness for them to learn is much higher now because that helps their security base as well, their anxiety levels, you pointed out nicely, Lily, earlier in the show. And because of that, the people that were selectively not willing to be trained or have no interest in doing anything other than they're already doing, they put themselves in jeopardy. And you're going to have to make hard choices should we have a sustained down, where we have to start making those cuts and reductions of cost. Mike pointed over on the side, we're asking questions on operating during a prolonged risk window. And it's if it reveals itself very early in the scenario, but planning requires preparations ready to roll out. Tough environment. It's true, but these are the conversations you should be stress testing your budget now. You should be swathing off sections, percentage of revenues, and seeing what the ugly costs pop up that you can or cannot control, and what are you going to do or not do about them or can do about them. Right. These are the things that should be going on in executive committee discussions now.
Right.
And putting profiles of priorities in lists that is shared with the team, so the team knows that there is an active thought process to this rather than a building anxiety of uncertainty of like, what's going on? I don't know. I haven't seen the GM. He's been in his office all day. Those things just fester. It's amazing the secondary conversations that exist when you're not including them in the conversation.
Yeah, and scenario planning, hugely important, Right. So that way, I mean, that's a key aspect of leadership, is to say, okay, we're going to plan for these, and it doesn't matter, best case, worst case, and, kind of what we're going to do. But at least if you even do it that way, the staff, the team, and, your direct reports can understand, wow, this is worse than we thought. We're going to plan C here. And everybody kind of knows, okay, plan C, we're doing this. And we thought about these things instead of just, oh gosh, we were hoping things would get worse. And what do you know? They did. What do we do now? That's the worst situation you can possibly be in.
Lily?
So I wanted to, I know we're getting a little bit low on time, but a very tactical tip for anybody who is doing hands-on revenue management right now who works with an RMS. The way that an RMS is designed is to look for the latest trends and start to predict them, but it's going to make this part of your historical record of demand, and you don't want that. So it's really important that every system does it a little bit differently, so we recommend that you reach out to your account manager if you don't know how to handle it. But number one, look at what's happening in March right now and decide how much of that you want to take forward within your RMS to influence future demand so that your system can work properly. Sure. And secondly, you want to make sure that you're marking where the declines began for your particular market or hotel. That won't be the same date for everybody, but know when that started, and then make sure that you also define the endpoint, because you're going to want to pull back that entire history out of your RMS so that it's not negatively impacting you for years to come, dropping your rates and assuming a similar, because obviously your system has no clue what coronavirus is. So you want to make sure that you are taking that tactical step with your technology right away to make sure that it is supporting you and not just hindering you.
Good point. And Amy, you brought that earlier about keeping a log of what things. I'll add to that from a marketing perspective. We've benchmarked and bookmarked everything from an analytics perspective on the marketing side for traffic and tracking, so that we can go back and when we do year over year, you're right, we create an artificial, it's not artificial, but in sense of trending, it's artificial. It's an artificial reduction in demand that creates the trending skew to go wrong, so that we don't look at the impact of what we can't put back into the system in the future or in present tense and next year. But, in comparison, by the same token, you almost in your way taking a snapshot of what the progression of trending was prior to all this and kind of ghosting that on to next year as if the world hadn't gone through this, whatever it is going to become. This is the trending we should be comparing ourselves to, in the sense of, are we escalating or de-escalating from where we are? Or we might just, to a reality, be at a lower point of start, and we can't go to those numbers anymore because of the demand that changed because of all this. So you got to use all three, I guess, in that sense, to make them an accurate representation. So.
And I'm going to have to jump off.
Yeah, this has been over 2 hours. And again, Amy and Dean, thank you for jumping in with us and joining us for all of that. I would have to say, just out of courtesy, Amy, thank you so much. We're going to have you as a guest host on our show. Dean, that door is always open for you, and we've been bugging you about that for a long time, so we'll get you on that way as well, because you have amazing insights on Metasearch that we never even scratched today. Amy, if people want to know more about you and what you do, where is it they can find you?
Absolutely. Our website is getgogroup.com. That's GITGO group.com. And they can find me at Amy I at getgogroup.com.
Excellent. And Mr. Dean, where is it they can find you and all the things you do with DerbySoft?
So very simple, at derbysoft.com, and certainly welcome to look me up on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Mr. Robert Cole, we're going to leave Lily for last because she always has that long, I do everything in the world thing.
No, Lily, please go first. Ladies first.
All right, ladies first. Lily.
The warrior's not dead.
Where can they find you, and what do you do? And
maybe I can run the timeout so Robert can't. No, I'm just kidding.
That's right.
My name is Lily Mockerman. I am the CEO of Total Customized Revenue Management, which you can find at tcrmservices.com, and also one of the founding partners of ThinkUp Enterprises, where we do hospitality consulting, technology assessments, and whatnot for the hospitality industry, and that's at thinkupenterprises.com. And you can find us on social media at both of those handles too. There,
And please look at the chat notes. I'm going to take all the links you gave us as well. There's a survey in there as well that Lily shared that will help her in assessing and sharing data later as well. We'll drag that back into the live show as well. Mr. Robert Cole, I'm sorry we ran out of time to talk to you today, but thanks. No, just go ahead. Since we didn't get to your amazing list, where if people want to sign up for the list that we didn't get to today, where can they sign up, Robert?
If you go to bit.ly/Rock Cheetah, all lowercase, you can get the Rock Cheetah hospitality update, which today had a lot of very interesting articles. And the way searching for upbeat ones was a little tricky.
Yeah,
but there is a smattering of those in there. But why are dressers vanishing from hotel rooms? Which actually Val Perini was really wanting to talk about. I saw.
Having Valley.
But actually, can we please cover the rut row?
No,
please?
Lily's got to go. Lily,
Okay.
do you have us one more minute, or do you got to go?
Be really quick.
Come on, Robert. Robert, really quick. Seriously?
The rut row, we don't want to break tradition. I mean, this is extraordinary times. We need to grab onto these pillars of faith.
Okay, Phil.
Really quick.
There's a problem in Thailand, and the Daily Mail had videos of hundreds of hungry monkeys swarming the Thai streets as rival gangs fight over food. So it's basically kind of the origin of rise of the Planet of the Apes, because all these tourists used to feed the monkeys bananas. The tourists are gone, and the monkeys are not having any of this shit. So they're like, let's go find the food.
Okay. So lesson learned, people who don't have tourists, feed the monkeys.
As things happen here, we are not going to have monkeys running in the streets is the silver lining from the rut row. So
I feel like they'll have pigeons instead, really.
Yeah, and Mike will get to your other question on it as well and so forth on next show. We'll make sure we'll add it to the next show for this. Mr. Robert Cole, Rock Cheetah, where is it?
RockCheetah.com or at Robert K. Cole on social media.
Excellent. This show will be shared with Alhoa's team as well as HSMEI's team for further distribution, but you can still find it at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. Look for live show number 240. There's links to our 239 other shows that we've been doing for 6 years every week, which are just the same thing we did. We just happen to have different clientele this time on the show. And Dean and Amy, you're part of that process. And thank you very much for the opportunity to have you live on the show.
One more thing to close with. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Stay 6 feet away from
and spay and neuter your dogs.
And try to do something for people who need help, right? And who are at risk.
Be kind.
Try to follow those 4 steps, and things will be better instead of worse.
Yeah. With that, I thank you all for your time today, and thank everyone that joined us on all the channels and all the comments and dialogue, and we look forward to bringing you back again next week, Friday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, as always, for show number 241 next week, This Week in Hospitality Live. Thank you all. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.